I never knew my son could break my heart like this. Until I realized the unimaginable sacrifice. I will never forget the day everything fell apart. The air was cold, biting at my skin as I stood in that sterile waiting room, the fluorescent lights glaring down like interrogators. My heart beat like a war drum, loud and chaotic. I could hardly breathe. It felt like the walls were closing in, squeezing out every ounce of hope I had left. David was lying on that hospital bed, so small, so fragile. His chest barely rising and falling, like a whisper against the deafening silence. I could hardly recognize him. Just weeks ago, he was running around, laughter spilling from his lips, bright eyes sparkling with mischief. Now, all I saw was a shell of my happy boy, hooked up to machines that hissed and beeped as if keeping a beat to the song of despair. Why did this happen? It felt unreal, like some twisted nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. Was it my fault? I couldn't shake the guilt clinging to me like a shadow. I remembered the mornings when I had pushed him to practice his piano, wanting him to be the best. Had I sacrificed too much for ambition? My chest ached just thinking about it. Our small apartment, the walls felt like they were whispering secrets, memories flooding back. David in his superhero costume, imagining himself saving the world. My little boy with dreams bigger than the sky. And now? I felt like I was watching those dreams slip away, like sand through my fingers. As the doctor came in, my stomach twisted. Their faces wore a mask I recognized all too well. Pity. Fear. I could feel the air thicken with tension. Something was off. The way they paused, glancing at each other. My mind raced. You did everything you could, my husband whispered beside me, the tremor in his voice cutting through me. His eyes were red, filled with tears he fought to hold back, but it was the look on his face that truly crushed me. He'd been my rock, but here we were, both crumbling under the weight of our son's suffering. That day, I noticed something strange: the way David's monitors flickered, almost as if in response to the unspoken thoughts swirling in the room. I glanced at my husband, and for a moment, I could swear I saw something flash in David's eyes, a spark of defiance, a cry for help. But it flickered away too fast for me to grasp, lost in the chaos of uncertainty. I reached out, trembling hands brushing his forehead, warm and yet so cold. My heart shattered with every heartbeat that echoed painfully in the emptiness around us. What was I willing to sacrifice to see him smile again? I thought I knew love. I thought I knew loss. But standing there, hope flickering like the overhead lights, I realized I was just beginning to understand the unimaginable. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. As days turned into a blur of white coats and beeping machines, it became an odd rhythm in my life, an unyielding pulse of anxiety that kept me anchored to that dimly lit room. Each morning, I'd wake with reluctant resolve, forcing myself to step into the reality of our situation. I'd sit beside David, holding his hand while his breath came ragged, and the world outside continued inexplicably thriving. One afternoon, with the winter sun streaming through the small window, I caught sight of a nurse, Rosalie, whose gentle demeanor was a balm to my shattered spirit. She entered the room with an easy smile that contrasted sharply with the heaviness of our circumstances. "You're such a brave little fighter," she said softly to David, adjusting the blanket around him with tender care. There was kindness in her presence, an unexpected warmth that made the cruel environment feel a little less hostile. She took a moment to sit with me, leaning against the wall, sharing reassurances that felt good but hollow as they echoed off the stark hospital walls. "Sometimes," she said, "we find the strength we didn't know we had when we're faced with the unimaginable. I nodded but felt the bitterness rise, the walls of my heart closing in again. Strength? What did I have to show for it? All I felt was this helplessness, a constant fear that whispered in my ears, what if it's too late? The following days dragged on, marked by whispered conversations, a flurry of medical updates, occasional dreams that turned into grim realities, and secrets disguised in mundane chatter. My husband and I shared fleeting glances across the sterile room, our minds entangled in that shared torment, knowing the weight of unspoken words that hovered in the sweltering air. Then came the day the doctor approached us with a grave expression that could cut through the thickest fog. "We need to discuss alternative treatments," he said, his voice steady but laced with urgency. I barely heard the next words tumbling from his mouth, the room spinning a vortex of dread that threatened to snatch away my fragility and crush the remaining bits of hope still pulsing in my heart. Just then, David's eyes flitted open, and for the briefest moment, he looked right at me. "Mom." His voice cracked, a whisper of the boy I used to know, before this nightmare swallowed him whole. My heart swelled, a mixture of joy and sorrow flooding through my veins. I rushed to his side, pressing my forehead against his, breathing him in as if he'd evaporate in the air between us. "I'm here," I sobbed, each word thick and raw. There was a flicker of recognition in his gaze, the boy peeking out from the shadows of pain. "I want to go home," he murmured, his small hand gripping mine weakly but fiercely. "You said I could come home once I got better." My heart cracked open at his words, slicing through my chest with a bittersweet ache. "I wish we could go home right now," I replied, holding on to that flickering flame of belief that some miracle might come, a chance for normalcy in a world that felt irrevocably broken. In the corner of the room, Rosalie watched the exchange, her eyes misting with unshed tears as she stepped closer. "You're doing so well, David. You're the strongest boy I know," she said encouragingly, instantly lighting the room where shadows once loomed. The connection she formed felt like a thread stitching together the frayed edges of our shattered lives, even just for a moment. But as the moments passed into silence, the weight I carried clawed at my thoughts. What if we missed the window for alternative treatments? Each day that slipped by felt like a dagger, and uncertainty loomed larger than life. At last, there was a knock on the door. Another doctor, this one a stranger. "Can I speak with you both?" My stomach nodded as I nodded. In an instant, I felt utterly unmoored, the panic rising like a tidal wave, crashing against my newly fragile hope. With trembling hands, I gestured to my husband, who stood as a sentinel by my side. What further burden could they add to our already broken hearts? Whatever news lay ahead would likely splinter us further. As we turned to face the twisting tides of fate, a revelation came rushing forth. I had thought nothing in this world could wound my heart more deeply, but it now dawned upon me that the true sacrifice was never just about David's condition. It was about what we were choosing to surrender every day in this fight, even as we clung to every last shred of ourselves. "Your son needs us to make a decision," the doctor said softly, and the sound echoed, unraveling the very fabric of our reality. The walls seemed to close in again, and for the briefest moment, I lost my grip on everything, the menacing shadows creeping in like tendrils of despair. The days that followed collapsed under the weight of dread, each one blending seamlessly into the next, punctuated by sleepless nights and a growing sense of urgency. I sat with my legs curled beneath me on the stiff hospital chair, David's frail frame occupying a bed surrounded by monitors that seemed to pulse in time with my racing heart. Each beep served as a reminder of his precariousness, and I wondered how much longer this could last. My husband, however, was consumed by a quiet resolve that felt foreign to me. He spent hours researching alternative treatments, poring over splotchy Facebook posts and anecdotal accounts, while I often found myself lost in the sense of despair that threatened to choke me. I looked at David, his innocent face marred by exhaustion, and I felt the pang of guilt gnawing at me. I should be fighting harder, pushing through this haze, but the fear had become an expanding void, consuming every ounce of will I needed to muster. One afternoon, as the sun spilled through the window, casting a warm glow across David's bed, a small package arrived. It was a care package from some distant relatives, little trinkets and toys that were meant to bring comfort, yet, in my state, they felt like hollow gestures, reminders of a world that had forgotten us. I placed the package on the corner of the bed, the colorful wrapper stark against the sterile white sheets. We briefly glanced at it, a shared understanding passing between us. Nothing could chase away the shadows lurking behind our eyes. That day, as I sat in the chair, I relayed stories of happier times to David, recounting his first day of school, the family vacation spent chasing waves, and the countless moments that had painted our lives with laughter. His eyes flickered with life, but only momentarily. He was tethered to a reality that was punishingly different than the memories I painted for him. I wanted our stories to reach him, to remind him of all that lay waiting, yet my voice cracked as the images in my mind collided with the unrelenting truth of our situation. "Do you remember the summer we went to the lake?" I asked hesitantly, trying to anchor us in those golden memories. In response, he turned his gaze to the ceiling, lost in the recesses of his mind. I gripped his hand harder, desperate for him to spark the fire of recognition. "Yes," he finally whispered, a ghost of a smile teasing his lips. "I loved the canoe." "Yes. You paddled so fast, just like a little dolphin," I said, my heart lifting momentarily. But as quickly as the warmth filled the air, it ebbed. "Can we go back?" he asked innocently. The question pierced through the fragile veneer I had crafted, laying bare the truth I had been trying to shield us from. "Maybe one day," I answered, though I didn't believe it. I couldn't bear the thought of false promises. It was then that Rosalie entered, her gentle manner juxtaposing sharply with the heaviness hanging between us. She carried a small bouquet of wildflowers, bright blooms that felt almost surreal against the bleak hospital landscape. "These are for you, David," she said, placing the flowers in his tiny hand. "I thought they might brighten your day a little." David's face lit up, illuminating the shadows that had cocooned him for so long. "Look, Mom," he beamed. "I have flowers." I smiled despite myself, finding solace in his fleeting joy, but simultaneously, an unsettling feeling crept into my heart. How could such a small gesture instill happiness when everything felt so precarious? But then something unexpected happened. David sighed quietly and leaned back against the pillows, his eyes flickering with exhaustion. "I just want to be brave like you, Mom," he stated, his voice soft and sincere. Those words, fragile yet weighty, wrapped around my heart like a lifeline. "Bravery doesn't always mean being strong, David," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Sometimes it's okay to be scared." And for a moment, time slowed, allowing us to exist in that bubble of understanding, as if admitting our fears somehow traded pieces of our pain with each other. Still, as the evening cast its long shadows, the specter of our reality returned. I glanced out the window to see the sunset bleeding into twilight, the glow turning the hospital's stark outlines into silhouettes that felt like whispered prayers. I longed for clarity, for resolve, but the distance between hope and reality felt insurmountable. As my husband returned that evening from yet another meeting with a specialist, the anxiety radiated off him in waves. He offered a brief smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "We need to talk," he said, his voice trembling slightly. I nodded, dread pooling in my stomach. The air turned electric as I framed the words in my mind, preparing for the conversation I dreaded but knew was inevitable. "Here are the options," he began, but before he could finish, a loud alarm blared through the room, piercing the fragile stillness. Red lights flashed and the air turned frantic as nurses rushed in, their faces a mask of urgency. In that dreadful moment, as I watched the bustle surround my son, the ground beneath me felt like it was slipping away. Everything I clung to, every promise of hope, felt like it was being pulled from my grasp. And in the eye of that storm, I realized I was once again unprepared for what lay ahead. "Mom!" David shouted, his eyes searching for me in the chaotic swirl. The pulse of uncertainty felt palpable, reverberating through the very marrow of my bones. Would I have the strength to withstand what was coming next? In that heartbeat of realization, everything that mattered hung by a thread, tethered to David's fragile existence. And as panic settled over the room, another shocking thought pierced the darkness. There was something I hadn't shared with my husband, something that lingered on the edge of my consciousness, demanding to be acknowledged even amid the impending chaos. Time was slipping away, and I hadn't been honest about everything I felt. The chaos ebbed and flowed like an insatiable tide, nurses rushing, monitors beeping with frantic urgency. My heart raced in rhythm with the sirens blaring from David's bed, drowning out whatever words might have formed in the back of my mind. I stood, frozen, as the world around me spun faster than I could comprehend. "Mom!" David called out again, his voice laced with desperation. Instinctively, I stepped forward, pushing past the swarm of white coats. I could barely breathe, the air thick with antiseptic scents that stained the hope I clung to. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the storm of medical personnel fell silent, the beeping subsiding into a solemn hum. I found David's gaze, his wide eyes searching through the chaos, and I reached for him, my heart splitting down the middle. "I'm here, sweetheart," I exclaimed, my voice breaking as I grasped his tiny hand, feeling the warmth seep into my ice-cold fingers. The nurse standing close by met my gaze, the flicker of worry in her eyes cutting deeper than any patient's chart ever could. "We need to stabilize him," she said, diverting her attention back to the machines that seemed to breathe their warnings in synchrony. I watched, helpless, as the team of nurses buzzed around my son like frantic bees, connecting wires and adjusting doses. David's face contorted with confusion and fear, and at that moment, I understood that the weight of a mother's love was nothing compared to the crushing guilt of feeling unable to protect him. "Why are they doing that?" he asked, his voice shaking. "Just a little help, David. They're going to make you feel better," I replied, though the words felt inadequate, weak against the uncertainty of what lay before us, and just like that, all those memories, the canoeing, the lake, intimate moments shared under sunlit skies faded like echoes in a vast, empty canyon. In this instant, the reality that we could lose everything loomed larger than anything I'd ever encountered. "Stay with me, buddy," I urged, squeezing his hand tighter. "No matter what happens, I'll always be right here." A moment passed, and the hospital room grew heavier, filled with unspoken fears hanging in the air. Suddenly the attention shifted as a doctor stepped into the fray, clipboard in hand. His brow was furrowed in concentration. "We need to assess his response to the medications. We have a treatment plan in mind, but it's going to take some time. It won't be easy. Tell me what to do," I implored, desperation coloring my voice. The doctor's dark eyes searched mine, and there was a fleeting sense of something unshared in that moment, a shared understanding of the fragility of hope. "All we can do now is keep monitoring him closely. We'll surround him with care." With those words, I felt a glimmer of hope briefly light the dark, if only to remind me that amidst despair, there could still be moments of solace. As I stood vigil by David's bed, the minutes turned into hours. Just as fatigue threatened to pull me under, I felt a gentle hand on my shoulder. It was Rosalie, her face a mosaic of warmth and sorrow. "You're not alone," she whispered softly, squeezing my shoulder reassuringly. "I'll stay with you." Her presence was a lifeline, and in her warmth, I found a small moment of gratitude amidst the grim landscape spread before us. Despite the chaos, our fingers intertwined, tethered together in a quiet defiance against the overwhelming uncertainty. Hours later, David drifted into a fragile sleep, his breath slow and deliberate, a reminder of how vulnerable he was. As I settled into the stiff chair, exhaustion weighed heavily upon me. I leaned my head against the cool metal railing of his bed, fighting the pull of sleep, but the visions of lost days and unfulfilled dreams crept into my mind like shadows, whispering their bitter truths. Then, without warning, an unexpected voice broke through my thoughts. My husband returned, his face pale, carved with unease. "I got a call. It's about the clinical trial. They want to meet tomorrow." My heart dropped at that moment. The clinical trial, the one I hadn't wanted to think about, the one that promised so much but could also demand so horrifically much, the one that had the power to either save David or leave him more vulnerable than he was now. And my voice trembled, caught between anticipation and dread. "We have to decide quickly, but, if I'm being honest," he sighed, running a hand through his hair as if trying to sweep away the weight of the world. It could also mean a new path, one we never anticipated. Hope and fear warred within me, tearing at my insides as I glanced back at David, his small body so fragile beneath the crisp sheets. The prospect of a treatment unraveled before us, mixed with the specter of risk looming overhead. Before I could respond, a flash of conviction struck me, shaking my very foundation. What happens if this goes wrong? I asked, my voice barely a whisper, but he met my gaze with fierce determination. We have to try. We owe it to him. As we stood on the precipice of a pivotal decision, the weight of our united resolve echoed across the room. And yet, the unconfessed fear nestled deep in my chest, a monster that had been quiet until now began to claw its way to the forefront. I was haunted by the thought that this trial, this life-altering decision, might be the unforgivable act that would put my son's future on an irrevocable path. The world narrowed around that thought, and just as I was about to voice my darkest fear, the sterile atmosphere shattered with another blaring alarm from David's monitors. My heart sank as dread coiled tightly within me once more, each second ticking by like a countdown to an unknown fate. In the cacophony, as everyone sprang into action, amidst the chaos, a chilling realization firmed in my mind: I would have to confront the truth I had been hiding, not from my husband, but deep within myself. Time was slipping away faster than I could grasp, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the decisions we were about to make could either save us or tear us apart. Something unimaginable loomed ahead, and this moment would forever change the path of our lives. And it was this dread that clung to me as turbulence crashed against the fragile holding of hope. The room transformed into a whirlwind of commotion, the beeping monitors amplifying the mounting panic that surged within me. Nurses rushed in, faces set in grim resolve, while I felt the walls pushing in, ready to swallow me whole. As my heart raced in sync with the alarm's shrill cry, I clutched David's small hand tighter. Each pulse of his heartbeat felt like a lifeline trying to tether me to sanity. "Everything's going to be all right, David," I whispered, though the words caught in my throat. I could see the understanding flicker in his eyes, a precocious awareness of the fear lurking all around us. He squeezed back, a small gesture of strength that cracked my heart wide open. With relentless efficiency, a nurse, whose name tag read Lydia, maneuvered around us, her hands a flurry of activity as she assessed the readings on the monitors. "Stay calm, Mrs. Johnson. We're going to help him. Just keep talking to him." It was always easier to talk about the mundane things. I found solace in recollections of the past, the laughter echoing through summer afternoons. "Remember when we caught that fish together, the one you said might be the biggest in the world?" I praised, my voice trembling as I clung to the thread of nostalgia. "You were so proud of that fish." David's eyes flickered, a ghost of a smile appearing, but then his gaze shifted back to the nurses. "Mom, I'm scared," he admitted, his voice wavering like the ill-fated flame of a candle. And in that moment, the ground beneath me seemed to quake as I touched the brink of despair, feeling its icy drag. Before I could respond, the doctor stepped back into the fray, his expression somber yet reassuring. "We need to stabilize him quickly, we're increasing the medications now." The words came at me like a torrent, each syllable resonating with the harsh reality that David's life hinged on this precarious balance of chemicals and treatments. I searched for the strength within myself, my resolve to shield him faltering under the weight of the impending storm. "I can't go through with this," I blurted out, the admission crashing over me raw and unyielding as I felt the room constrict with a suffocating heaviness. I was terrified of making the wrong choice, scared of the imminent repercussions that a desperate decision could unleash. "Just take it one step at a time, we'll get through this together," Rosalie reminded me, her reassuring presence grounding me, if only for a moment. But as David's monitors stabilized, a heavy silence filled the room, the frantic energy replaced by a tense stillness fraught with unspoken fears. I felt my husband's gaze on me, a silent plea to discuss the trial that loomed larger than life, the one that could be everything or nothing, both a beacon of hope and a harbinger of despair. As if sensing the gravity of our unvoiced concern, a nurse brought over a comforting blanket for David, her smile a ray of softness amid the clinical starkness. "You're doing great, sweetheart," she said gently, tucking him in gently. We're all here for you. In that small act, a flicker of warmth enveloped my heart, binding my fragments together, yet the fear still lurked behind every beat of my heart. It was a simple gesture, but in the bleak space we occupied, it felt monumental, like a fortress of solidarity amidst chaos. Yet, even as touches of kindness seeped through the cracks of our despair, thoughts of the clinical trial tethered me to darkness. I wanted desperately to believe in hope, but what if the trial led us down paths unfathomably worse? The hope was blinding, but the darkness loomed just out of sight, waiting to pounce. As night fell, the hum of the hospital took on a different tone, the lights dimming but the suffocating reality remaining. I could feel my husband moving closer, his breath warm against the cold air that filled the room. "We need to think strong, for David," he urged, as I grappled with the urgency to speak my mind. "Strong?" My voice trembled with emotion. "What if we're not strong enough?" "We'll find a way," he said, clinging to the belief even as the gulf of uncertainty yawned between us. Together. But another alarm shattered that fleeting moment of camaraderie. David's once stable breaths took a turn, the soft rise and fall of his chest giving way to alarming irregularity. Nurses flooded into the room, and I felt my world tilt at an unnatural angle. "Mom! What is happening?" David's voice, now frail and filled with panic, cut through the chaos sharper than any razor. I felt my breath hitch, my mind racing through an avalanche of thoughts. Who needed me more right then, my husband, my son, or was it just the infinite unraveling I felt within? As the lights dimmed further and shadows stretched across the sterile walls, I held my son's gaze, and in that moment, I couldn't help but wonder if there was still a way out of this storm. With every pulse of alarm echoing through that heavy, sterile room, I saw not just my son's body frail and vulnerable, but the life and love pouring from my heart, twisted with fear and hope, a battle waging within the depths of sacrifice. And just before I could utter a prayer, I caught sight of a figure out of the corner of my eye, a woman entering the room, a stranger yet somehow familiar. Her face struck a chord deep within me, but my thoughts spiraled with unknowing dread. As her eyes met mine, I felt a shiver of recognition, and with it, a harrowing new possibility unfolded before me, an unbelievable choice that could change everything. The strangers in white and blue engulfed the room, a symphony of urgency drowning out the raw anguish growing deep inside me. I felt as if I were watching a nightmare unfold through a glass barrier, each frantic movement and raised voice echoing unnervingly in my ears, but somehow at a distance. "Can someone please tell me what's happening?" I shouted, my voice faltering as fear tightened its grip around my throat. I was pleading, yet helpless, my whole being consumed by the sight of David so small in that big hospital bed, his pale skin contrasting sharply with the sterile white of the sheets. I felt stripped of sanity, as if my very essence were being siphoned away with every labored breath he took. "His oxygen levels are dropping," a nurse explained, her voice steady despite the chaos she orchestrated around him. "We're increasing his support. Just one moment, please." Mom. David's voice curled weakly around my name, and my heart splintered at the sound of desperation lacing his words. I don't want to be alone. Every instinct I possessed surged forward, screaming for me to reach for him, to pull him into my arms and promise him safety. But I was rooted, unable even to take one step toward him, bound by fear and the chaotic flurry happening all around. My husband's hand intertwined with mine, squeezing tightly as if we could somehow meld our strength together to break through the suffocating sense of hopelessness threatening to swallow us whole. In a momentary lapse of clarity, I caught sight of the unfamiliar woman again, the one who had walked in so abruptly before. Her eyes locked onto mine, carrying a haunting familiarity that gnawed at my consciousness, but with each second far too valuable to waste, I shook it off as well as I could. I shifted my focus, reeling from the next wave crashing into our fragile family. Mom. David's voice, sounding weaker now, coiled around my heart. There was a tremor of fear beneath his word, an unyielding clinging to me for comfort. Desperation clawed inside me, the interminable tug-of-war between hope and despair forcing me to confront a truth I deeply did not want to face. As the nurses continued to work swiftly, one of them brought a device closer to his bed, connecting it to him with determination. "Stay with us, buddy. "You're doing great," she said, her smile fighting against the darkness we all felt circling. But as that soothing voice reached my ears, a single tear slipped down my cheek. I had to be strong for David, yet the weight of uncertainty buried me deeper into the shadows. It was a desperate struggle to tether the fear away when I felt so much peril weighing against my heart. "Mom! Please!" David cried out, and I felt the earthquake within. The rawness in his plea shifted something primal. "I'm right here, sweetheart," I whispered, inching closer despite the chaos around us. I grasped his small hand, the warmth and fragility of it igniting a flicker of hope deep within my chest. In that fierce connection, a memory suddenly washed over me like sunlight breaking through clouds. "Do you remember our tent under the stars, how we dared each other to sleep with the light off?" I murmured, trying to bring forth any semblance of comfort amid the chaos. He nodded timidly, his spirit flickering like a candle. "Yeah, we were so brave," he said, a faint smile ghosting his lips. "Exactly. You've always been the bravest of all," I replied, clawing for strength in my voice. I needed him to hold on, to see the story unfolding beyond today. Then, in an unexpected moment of vulnerability, the woman again approached, a gentle resolve softening her expression. "It's difficult to watch someone you love go through something like this," she said, as I glanced back at her, bewildered but curious. Her words felt like a life buoy thrown into tempestuous waters. "Who are you?" I managed to ask, my voice wrapped tightly in confusion. "I'm someone who understands. I've been there," she said, her eyes shimmering with unshed memories. "And it's terrifying. But sometimes, sacrifices are made out of love." Sacrifice. The word echoed ominously in my heart, and the shadows of the looming trial filled my thoughts again, each possibility more gut-wrenching than the last. "Your choice to enter that trial," she began. "What do you know about that trial?" My pulse quickened, the tension in my veins sparking anew as adrenaline coursed through me. She had my full attention now, my heartbeat drumming a chaotic rhythm in tandem with the alarms echoing around the room. "I know about the risks. The dangers," she said solemnly. "But it's vital to understand not just the science, but the love behind every choice." As her words swirled around me, the room grew silent save for the rhythmic beeping of the machines. I looked back at David, his eyes searching mine, filled with an innocent desperation that shattered what remained of my already fragile composure. I felt myself unraveling as the woman's gaze bore into my soul, an understanding brewing that something far larger than us was at play. "You must weigh every aspect of what this journey holds," she advised, her voice a soothing balm amidst my turmoil that I wanted to reach for her and shake her, ask her how she could speak of love so freely against the backdrop of heartache. What kind of sacrifice could justify this torment? But her eyes shimmered with knowing, that all-knowing light that hinted at the unimaginable choices that lay before us. The alarms fell silent. For a moment, I couldn't breathe, the air thickening with the weight of what could be. But as I gazed into David's hopeful eyes filled with a trust too immense to shatter, I felt the ground beneath me shift. In that vulnerable moment, the truth loomed larger than life, like an unwelcome specter forming in the shadows. What lay ahead could change everything, or it might tear a fragile family apart, and as all of this dawned, a new realization choked the air from my lungs. It was not just a choice I carried, it was a fork in our road, a painful reckoning that no mother should ever have to face. Despair tangled with tenacity in the depths of my heart, and the words of that familiar stranger circled me like a haunting lullaby. It was then that David bolted upright, his expression morphing into alarm, a panic resonating from someone beyond his years. "Mom! What if I don't wake up again? What if?" And just as hope dwindled, out of nowhere, another crisis unfurled from the pit of darkness, a revelation that threatened the very fabric of our struggle, leaving me gasping for breath as the world I knew careened towards an unimaginable precipice. The sterile smell of antiseptic mingled with the increasingly suffocating air in the hospital room. As David's words hung heavy between us, I felt the floor shift beneath my feet, a jumble of fears and questions swirling chaotically. The brightness in his eyes dimmed under the heaviness of what he was struggling to articulate, and I knew that we were teetering on the edge of some irrevocable choice. No. You're going to wake up. You have to. My voice trembled with desperation, each word a plea that clawed its way out of my throat. But even as I spoke, I felt the weight of betrayal settle deep in my chest. It seemed unfair that I could be so tethered to his fear yet so torn by the possibilities that loomed beyond the immediate crisis. The woman in white shifted her gaze from me to David, her expression both sympathetic and fiercely protective. "Do you understand, David?" she asked softly, probing gently. "Each breath you take is part of a greater journey. Sometimes that journey rearranges everything we think we know." I wanted to scream out no, I wanted to protect him from the very idea that he might not wake up again. The thought slashed through me like a razor, a gut-churning agony that I couldn't put into words. "Mom!" he called again, the anguish weaving through his small voice, rupturing my heart. I rushed to his side, grasping his hand tighter, as if my very grip could tether him to the world we had built together. The warmth of his skin brought my mind back to the soft memories of first bike rides and bedtime stories, the light-hearted laughter that used to fill our home. "Do you remember when we planted those sunflowers in the backyard?" I said, suddenly desperate to evoke any semblance of calm. "We planted them so deep, and they grew so tall. Just look at how bright they are. Just like you, strong and full of light." "Yeah," he replied hesitantly, but the spark of joy in his eyes was fleeting. I exhaled a sharp breath, wishing I could beam peace into his soul, wishing I could erase the fear morphing in his chest. Before I could dig deeper into this anchor of our shared past, the chaotic noises from the nearby nurse station erupted louder, sparking a fire of urgency throughout the room. Frantic steps and hushed conversations filled the air, adding layers to the palpable tension circling around us. David's eyes darted back and forth, searching for clarity amid confusion. "Mom, please. I'm scared." His small voice trembled, and my heart shattered anew as I witnessed all at once his vulnerability and courage, a stark collision that left me breathless, that I needed his small fingers within my own. "I'm right here, buddy. I won't leave you, I swear." But the sound of monitors beeping rapidly only drew my eyes back to the gathering storm of uncertainty. David's grip began to slacken, and I could feel the pulse of dread re-emerging. Just then, the door swung open, and an older doctor entered, his expression unreadable. The instant I laid eyes on him, a sickening sensation twisted painfully in my stomach, a sense of foreboding that I couldn't shake. "I need to speak with you," he said, his voice steady but grave. My husband's hand trembled violently in mine as I quickly glanced at David, his eyes narrowing in confusion. "Stay with him," I instructed softly, rising slowly from my seat. I stepped aside, allowing the doctor to pull me into the hall, my heart racing as countless nightmares flooded my mind, the flickerings of what-ifs multiplying like shadows behind my eyelids. "His condition is complicated," the doctor began, and just those 3 words sent a chill racing down my spine. "We've exhausted numerous treatments, but there are new options. Ones that come with significant risks." The air thickened with the weight of his words, and I struggled to digest their meaning. "What kind of risks?" I whispered, dread enveloping me like a veil. I could feel the clash of hope and terror within me, mumblings of faith wrestling against the specter of despair. "Experimental trials," he continued carefully. "This could mean life or death. Your son's condition is critical, and surgery could take too long. It's crucial to weigh what we know against what we hope." Time froze as I sucked in a breath of disbelief. I thought I had prepared myself for any possible outcome, but nothing could brace me for this confrontation, the choice of playing roulette with my son's life, taking a gamble against a silent clock ticking down towards an unclear eclipse. "Are you saying that there might be a possibility of a procedure that's dangerous? But it could save him?" I stammered, each word punctuated by emotion, fighting against the roiling chaos within me. "Yes," he confirmed, casting a side glance towards the room we had just exited. "But it could also put him in an even worse state. He needs your consent." I felt 1,000 emotions racing through me at once: confusion, anger, grief, and the flickering embers of hope. How could they leave the decision in my hands? How could I? If there was a chance, a slim one. Just as I opened my mouth to respond, a scream echoed ghost-like down the hallway. It pierced the air, twisting my heart further into a knot of raw terror. An anguished cry that shattered the weight of silence, unraveling more than just the moment. It twisted its way directly into my core, feeding every uncertainty I carried. The ground tilted beneath me, each second bound tighter to fate's cruel design. It was too much. The pull between hope and despair rippled through my veins, pressing against my heart until I felt I might break. Everything felt like a quagmire, and I was stuck. Before I could call for my husband, the doctor stepped away, his face breaking into a solemn mask. "Take your time. Just don't take too long." And with that, the stakes were raised higher than ever. I was left standing at an unfathomable precipice, the weight of my son's life dangling precariously in the balance, leaving me gasping for answers in the unfolding darkness. And just as reality settled around me, something devastating began to seep through the edges of my turmoil, an unsettling thought that perhaps the answers I sought were the very ones that could unravel everything I had ever known about love, sacrifice, and the relentless nature of hope. The air in the corridor felt heavy, closed off from the chaos swirling behind the hospital doors. I tried to calm the frantic beating of my heart, taking slow, measured breaths as I forced myself to ease the tension swelling in my chest. Still, I couldn't shake the terrible echo of that distant scream. It lingered. Bathroom tiles felt cold and hard beneath my feet, contrasting the heat suffusing every part of me. "My son may die," I murmured softly to myself, the words sticky and raw, barely leaving my lips before they melted into the atmosphere. Would he be robbed of even the chance to fight? The thought was either unbearable or ignited, pushing me closer to the brink of two paths, one littered with uncertainty and peril, the other a quick slip back into the familiar warmth of ignorance. That I glanced toward David's room, and for a heartbeat, all I could see was the silhouette of his small body, lost among a sea of wires and machines, a lone sailor adrift in a dark, turbulent ocean. A part of me yearned to run back to him, to gather him into my arms and shield him from this cruel reality that stretched beyond the sterile walls, while another part stood still, ensnared in the dread of making a decision that could fracture the very fabric of our existence. As I stood trembling, a gentle hand clasped my shoulder, and I turned to find a nurse I hadn't seen before. A kind gaze hid behind her tired eyes. She wore her professional demeanor like armor, but her compassion shone through the cracks. "It's hard, isn't it?" she said quietly, as though she read my turmoil. "Knowing you have to make a choice that will change everything." I nodded, barely able to speak, my throat constricted with emotion. "I don't know what to do," I confessed, my voice barely above a whisper. "What if I choose wrong? What if my words trailed off, too afraid to voice the worst-case scenario?" "Life is full of uncertainties, especially in this place," she replied, her tone soothing like a balm on a raw wound. "You're not alone in this. You will make the choice that's right for you and David. Trust your instincts. He knows you love him." Her words sparked a faint flicker in the corner of my heart, the embers of my hope momentarily reignited. If he could hear me, if somewhere beneath the haze of fear and confusion, he could sense my love thrumming through all the chaos, perhaps I could trust that connection as a compass. Just as fresh tears threatened to spill, the nurse squeezed my shoulder gently and offered me a small smile. "I'll be right here if you need anything. You're stronger than you think." With those quiet assurances, she turned and slipped back into the frenetic pace of the hospital. My mind, however, remained stormy. I felt like a shipwrecked survivor, cast ashore on the rocks of indecision, battered by waves of emotional turmoil. I could only imagine how David felt, so small and burdened by fears beyond his years. Suddenly, the memories surged through my mind. David's laughter as he tugged on my hand to explore new worlds in our backyard, the slivers of sunlight illuminating the flowers we planted together. I had taught him about resilience, I had promised him we would weather any storm. With newfound determination, I took a step toward the room, feeling fire ignite within my veins. My heart thrummed a fierce rhythm of purpose. I would not allow fear to define this moment. One foot after the other, I expelled the shadows back into the corners of my heart, pushing forward through the emotional fog, resolute as I reached the doorway, however, I froze. The air shifted, heavy again with somber gravity. The doctor, earlier insistent, stood before me, his expression darkening as he spoke swiftly. "We've had another update. You need to decide quickly, Claire. David's condition is worsening." As those words crashed over me like a wave, a spike of icy dread seeped into my chest. "What do you mean?" I stuttered, panic rising uncontrollably. "What update? His vitals have taken a turn, he's slipping. We're running out of time for the experimental trial," and his words faded into a dissonance of static in my ears, my heart pounding a shattering cadence against my ribcage. "Is there no other option?" I cried out, desperation clawing at the edges of my voice. "He's only a child. How can you leave this decision to me?" "I can't, Claire," he interrupted, an almost pained look crossing his features. "I wish there was another way, I do. But right now it's either this or the likelihood of losing him altogether." The hardness of the walls felt like they were closing in on me, my breath growing shallow. My mind reeled with desperate thoughts, spinning and colliding like frenzied orbiting planets. As if my decisions had the power to reach into the future, everything rested on my shoulders. "Please, I need to know that choosing this one to sign his death warrant." I whimpered through my rising panic. In that harrowing moment, with stakes soaring higher than ever, an unexpected clarity washed over me. This saleable chance, cloaked in danger, could just be the lifeline he needed. But before I could process the strength of that fleeting sense of hope, the chaos that had swirled outside David's room surged into the forefront. Another scream echoed hauntingly through the hallway, still tinged with rawness, almost impossibly familiar. Panic erupted in my heart. "No. No. What is happening?" I turned to the doctor, my stomach churning with dread, but just as I needed an answer, he pulled away, urgency etched across his face. "I have to check on the other patient," he mumbled, barely glancing back. "Wait." But he was already gone, lost in the hurried footsteps echoing off the walls. Alone now, I stood at the precipice of decision, trembling as the dichotomy of choices weighed down upon me heavily. My heart raced between love and fear, caught in a snare where I felt suspended in time, helpless against the force's shape-shifting fate. The cries had changed, each one deeper than the last, resonating with a sinister foreboding that seeped into my chest, quaking the ground from beneath me. That I thought of David. My sweet boy, the one who loved sunflowers and his mother's laughter, who had brought joy to every crevice of our lives. I could feel the walls starting to close in, still I fought against the panic shouting at me to flee. When soaked in clarity amid the chaos, a new realization struck, a depth of terrible grief emerging from the edges of my heart. Perhaps in saving David, I would also uncover something unimaginable, a sacrifice I never intended to make but now hovered like a shadow over me, taunting at the fringes of existence. "David," I whispered, clenching my fists. "Please hold on. I will find a way." But as those words faded into the void, uncertainty landed like a lead weight in the pit of my stomach, solidifying the fear that I had barely begun to comprehend what it truly meant to fight for him. Something was stirring in the darkness around me, and it would take every ounce of courage I had left to confront the spiraling conflicts that lay ahead, to face the unimaginable sacrifice that loomed just beyond my grasp, ready to shape our lives in ways that defied understanding. The silence in the hallway hovered like a heavy mist, thick and oppressive, as I wrestled with the weight of my choices. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a vast abyss, peering into its depths, unsure of how far down I might fall. Each breath I took was fraught with the urgency of time slipping away. David needed me now more than ever, yet here I stood, paralyzed by the weight of impending loss. Suddenly, a burst of light caught my eye, an ethereal glow pouring from a small window leading to the hospital's rooftop garden, untouched by the sterile veil that dominated the interior. It beckoned me like a distant siren, promising solace from the storm raging within. Without a clear thought in my mind, I found myself moving toward that glimmer. The elevator ride felt eternal, the clang of the doors echoing above the cacophony of the emergency department. As the elevator shuddered to a stop, I was greeted by the gentle rustle of leaves, an inviting contrast to the hollow despair that engulfed me moments ago. Stepping out onto the rooftop, I was enveloped in a wave of evening freshness tinged with lavender and hints of rain. The sky above was a twilight canvas, brushed with hues of pink and orange, as if nature itself was urging me to breathe, to find peace amidst the chaos. I leaned against the railing, searching for a port in the storm that had spun my world out of control. Closing my eyes, I let the cool breeze caress my skin, recalling the sweet moments shared with David, the sound of his laughter dancing under summer sun, the way he'd close his eyes in bliss, blissfully aware of nothing else but joy. Those memories were short-lived visits to a place I longed to return to, moments that stood starkly against the backdrop of the present turmoil. Feeling an unexpected surge of connection, I found myself whispering into the wind, "I need you to fight, David. I can't lose you. Hold on, baby. Just hold on." Lost in prayer, the wind seemed to carry my words, intertwining them with the warmth of my love. In that moment, a single flower caught my eye, growing resiliently from a crevice in the stone wall, a tiny act of defiance against the odds. Hope surged, a quiet assurance that life can persist even in the harshest environments. It was a small, simple beauty, yet it spoke volumes. I understood then that just as this flower had fought for survival, so would I fight for my son with every fiber of my being. As I prepared to return inside, something caught my attention, a sound that echoed softly against the rooftops. I turned, my heart racing, and there I saw an elderly man sitting alone on a bench, his face etched with lines of experience, eyes reflecting the weight of not just years but unseen battles. He caught my glance and waved gently, a warm smile breaking through the shadows of his features. "It's a tough night, isn't it?" he asked, his voice rough yet surprisingly soothing. I nodded, the lump in my throat returning, unable to summon the words to explain the breadth of my fears and anxieties. Instead, I found comfort in the shared silence, the understanding that we were both navigating our own crises in this place of healing. "My son," I began, the details spilling out like a dam breaking, "he is sick." The man listened intently, nodding with empathy. "I've been here before, just like you. It's easy to feel lost, like all hope is fading away." He paused, taking a deep breath, the weight of the air evident between us. "But you can't give up. There's strength in love, and it has the power to carry him through. Believe in that." His words stirred something deep within me, an ember of hope that had flickered and waned, now rekindled by his unexpected kindness. "But what if I'm not strong enough?" I whispered, vulnerable and cracked. "Sometimes, just showing up is all the strength you need," he said. "And sometimes, what seems like an unimaginable choice may lead to remarkable outcomes. Just remember, despair is deceptive. You fight, no matter how broken you may feel." With each word, I felt a flicker of warmth seep through my cold fear, as if I were witnessing the fading twilight of despair give way to a new dawn. "Thank you," I finally managed, emotion wrestling at the corners of my voice. As we shared a moment of silence, I could feel time slipping by dangerously. It felt grounding and buoying all at once, two souls grasping onto faint threads of hope in the face of adversity. However, as the moment came to a close, a burst of static erupted from my phone in my pocket, shattering our fragile tableau. With trembling fingers, I answered the call, and my heart sank as I recognized the number on the screen, the hospital's ward. "This is Claire," I managed, my stomach churning. "Ms. Campbell, we've been trying to reach you. There's been a complication with David's case. You need to come back to the unit right away." "No, wait," I shouted, feeling the ground shift beneath my feet. "What do you mean, complication?" The elderly man's eyes widened with concern as I gripped the railing tighter, my heart decidedly unsettled. "His vitals are crashing. We need you to make a quick decision on the trial. He's losing consciousness, and we may not have much time left." The whirlwind of emotions collided within me, pinning me against the railing as I instinctively looked back to the man, grounding myself in that fleeting connection of hope we had shared. Would I have to make that decision now, just as everything felt so fragile, so precariously held together? "Oh God," I murmured, a shiver of dread coursing through me. That nagging thought returned once more, a looming sacrifice, one I now felt clawing at my insides. Would I lose myself along the way while trying to save him? The call ended abruptly, leaving in its wake a haunting silence as I turned back to the old man. But he was gone, leaving me with nothing but a whisper of sincerity. Fight. No matter how broken. As panic flooded back in, I leaned heavily against the railing, fighting against the painful tides of uncertainty. I knew I had to decide, but the choice before me felt insurmountable. What awaited me back inside felt an eternity away, yet all too imminent. Holding tight to the last remnants of hope, I took a shaky breath, summoned every ounce of courage, and steeled myself for the dark choices looming on the horizon. As I turned to make my way back, I caught a reflection of myself in the window, a woman trembling, clutching a thread of hope woven from love and fear. With every step toward that doorway, I was teetering on the brink of a profound, unimaginable sacrifice, ready to navigate the chaos ahead, uncertain of where the path might ultimately lead but determined to fight for David against all odds. As I stepped back into the hospital corridor, a whirlwind of emotions surged through me: fear, determination, love, and all of it coiled tightly around my heart. The gravity of my choices threatened to swallow me whole, and every heartbeat echoed in my ears like a countdown to an uncertain fate. I could almost feel the warmth of the sunflowers slipping through my fingers, their vibrant beauty a distant memory compared to the stark reality that lay ahead. It hit me like a freight train. The moment I said yes to the clinical trial, I would also be risking everything we had ever known: our love, our hope, our very future. The flurry of activity around me faded into a soft hum, and I could see David's small figure lying in the hospital bed, a fragile flicker of life amidst the chaos of machines and beeping monitors. The nurse's voice echoed in my mind: keep talking to him, stay with him. I rushed to his side, grasping his tiny hand that felt like ice against mine. David, honey, I'm here, I whispered fiercely, pressing my forehead against his, trying to lend him my strength even as I felt so weak. You're going to be okay. We are going to get through this together, I promise. In that moment, I felt the warmth of his spirit breaking through the fog of my fear. His eyes fluttered open, and in their depths, I could still see the boy who climbed trees and chased butterflies. Mom, he murmured, his voice barely a whisper. I'm scared. Those words sliced through me with an agonizing urgency, and I swallowed hard against the rising tide of tears. It's okay to be scared, I said, my voice choked with emotion. But we have to fight, David. You are the bravest boy I know, and I will always be by your side. I could see the spark of strength in his eyes, a fleeting moment of clarity amidst the despair. Just then, the doctor re-entered the room with a sense of urgency that snapped my focus back to the present. Claire, he addressed me in a grave tone, we've been monitoring David closely. His condition is critical, and we need your decision on the experimental trial now. If we wait any longer, we might lose him. It's a risk, but it might be our only chance. That moment hung terrifyingly in the air, and it felt like time itself had come to a screeching halt. All the noise faded into a reverberating silence, the gravity of my choice overwhelming me. What if something goes wrong? I found my voice trembling as the words broke free from my chest. What if it makes things worse? The doctor's face softened, and he replied, I cannot promise you that it will work. But without it, the path we're on leads nowhere. We need to act swiftly. With a deep breath, I locked eyes with David, his gaze steady and trusting, rooting me to this moment. My heart shattered anew at the sight of my little boy, the one who wore a smile brighter than the sun, who fought for every breath with a bravery that left me breathless. David, I said, cradling his hand in mine as though it were made of glass. Do you trust me? It was a simple question, but the weight of it carried the storm of our fears and hopes. He looked up at me, nodding slowly, and I felt as if the world shifted on its axis. In that instant, everything clicked into place: my love for him, the sacrifices I would make, the sheer will to push through the darkness. I trust you, Mom, he whispered, and those 3 words cemented my resolve. He was my compass, and in him, I found the strength to choose. Let us do it. We'll take the trial. I turned to the doctor, the urgency of my decision pulling us both into the storm of uncertainty. The doctor nodded, relief washing over his features as he hastily began to prepare for the procedure. The room buzzed back to life, nurses scurried around like busy bees, and the sterile air became thick with anticipation. A spark ignited in my heart, mingling hope and anxiety. That fusion of emotions unleashed a tide of gratitude that flooded me. I was doing this for David, for the warmth of his laughter, for all the cherished memories etched into my soul like the sun-kissed golden hues of summer. As they wheeled him toward the operating room, the atmosphere shifted into something almost magical. I squeezed his hand tightly, not willing to let go. "I love you, David. I'm right here, and I'm going to be waiting for you." I saw the flicker of a smile cross his face, one so familiar, its warmth enveloped us, banishing the shadows momentarily. "I love you too, Mom," he murmured, and then, as they ushered him through the double doors, the world outside seemed to melt away. Every moment now felt imbued with meaning. This was no longer merely about survival, it was about love, courage, and acceptance of the path we would carve together. And as I waited with nothing but hope coursing through my veins, I realized that the profound loss that had shadowed us for so long was, in fact, fueling the flicker of love that would guide us through. We were resilient. Time folded in on itself. Moments stretched like elastic, but somewhere in the distance, I could still hear the laughter of my boy, echoing like a gentle lullaby, reminding me of everything that mattered. Hours later, the tension was palpable as the doctor emerged, his expression one of cautious optimism. "We did everything we could. There will be challenges ahead, but David fought with remarkable strength and resilience, much like his mother." Tears streamed down my face, and in that moment, while the crowd of relatives and strangers once more murmured uncertain thoughts about next steps, I felt a warmth bloom in my chest. The shadows faded as laughter reverberated through the corridors, the promise of uncertainty carried on a tide of hope stronger than ever before. And standing at that connection of fear and detachment, I realized the ultimate truth: I would sacrifice whatever it took to ensure my son felt the embrace of love, a love strong enough to withstand life's fiercest storms. The sacrifices would never be in vain because love, despite its complexities, could always be transformed into hope. As I turned away, I felt the sunlight pouring through the large window, illuminating the dusty hospital room with warmth. With each step forward, I whispered softly to the universe, "Thank you for giving us this chance, for this gift called life." And with that statement, I knew in every part of my being that I was ready to face the storms ahead. Together, we would unveil new beginnings hidden behind the clouds of despair. Because when you sink your roots into love, every sacrifice is worth it, and every step toward hope leads us home. In the end, I realized that it wasn't just about the fight for life, but also the unsurpassed beauty of unconditional love standing steadfast, unwavering against the unfathomable darkness. And as I left the room, the last echo of that fragile journey whispered in my heart, a reminder of a boy with dreams bigger than the sky, cascading into a world just waiting for our return.